Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of the Don Lemon Show. I'm so happy that you are here. And it's special because a lot of folks have been asking, where does our democracy go from here? Especially now with Donald Trump going back into the Oval Office. What do Democrats do now? What do they have to do to win back the working class people, to actually win the White House, to actually win in general? What do they have to do? Well, the head of the Democratic Party will have a lot to say about that. The head of the DNC will, and some big names have thrown their hats into the ring. One of them, I believe the biggest, is Marianne Williamson, and she joins me now today. Marianne, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on with us today. And how are you, by the way?
I'm great, thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So the question is, what do Democrats need to do to win? Do they need to? I'm curious what you think about. Let's start with the Harris campaign. What do you think happened? What did she or they do wrong? And then we'll talk about what Democrats need to do next.
Well, I think that the fact that basically there was no primary sucked all the juice out of the excitement that could have been there.
Really?
The role of of the Democratic Party, like the role of any political party, is to facilitate democracy, not to try to manipulate it or to engineer it. The role of the party is to stand in the background. The role of the voters is to decide who a nominee will be. And then that's the point when the party should step in and do everything possible to help that candidate win.
Mm-hmm.
It was very aberrational the way the DNC announced very early that they saw their goal as helping Joe Biden get the nomination, peripheralizing, de-amplifying, and worse, other campaigns. And so there wasn't a sense that we were in there and Democrats were talking and Democrats were having a conversation about how we were going to beat Donald Trump in 2024. There was a year and a half there where the Republicans kept talking. God knows, they were having debates and they were having CNN town halls. And the establishment among Democrats was kind of putting a lid on any conversation among Democrats that might have occurred. And then that same thing continued into the turnover into Kamala Harris. That's one thing. And secondly, I feel that the Democratic Party has swayed from its own traditional ideals of unequivocal advocacy for the working people of the United States. You know, Don, it's a life principle when something goes wrong that you have to ask yourself, what was my part in this? What did I do or not do to enable this to happen? And if the Democratic Party is willing to do that, which it must, an organization must do this, a system must do this. It's not just an individual. You can't jump to what do we do now? You have to analyze what got me here.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Democratic Party does that, we have to ask ourselves, what void was created that allowed Donald Trump to arise in the first place? And when you do that, you see that if it hadn't been Donald Trump, it would have been someone. Because even the most rudimentary knowledge of history shows that whenever there are large groups of desperate people, then that becomes a kind of petri dish. And out of that inevitably arises all manner of personal dysfunction and societal dysfunction, including ideological capture by all kinds of psychotic forces, and almost always attraction to a political strongman. You can't leave. We're the only advanced nation that doesn't have universal health care. We have 70 to 90 million people underinsured or uninsured, and we can go on and on and on.
Marianne, we'll get to all that, but let me jump in here. I want to ask you a couple of things. You said a lot, and a lot of it I do agree with. Would you have primaried Joe Biden?
I did primary Joe Biden.
It's,
And the fact that you're not really clear about that, it proves my
no,
point
no, no, no,
that
no,
that was so
no,
de-amplified.
no. I meant the party. I understand what you're saying. I meant you're saying that the party didn't really, because the party was promoting Joe Biden, is what.
The party was more than promoting Joe Biden, I'm sorry to say.
Well, that's what
Uh,
I mean by would you have primaried? If you were the head of the DNC, you would have. What would
if
you have
I
done?
had been the head of the DNC, I would have said, hey, welcome Robert Kennedy Jr., welcome Marianne Williamson,
That's what
welcome
I was.
Dean Phillips, welcome Joe Biden. We'll be doing debates. I wouldn't have. I don't know what the arrangement was with CNN this time. That CNN did all the CNN town halls with Republican candidates, even when when my numbers were higher. So there was a whole, I call it a political media industrial complex,
Hmm.
that was really working strategically to de-amplify any voices other than his, including, as you know, if you're running in a Democratic primary and nobody sees you on CNN or MSNBC, then Democratic voters don't even know you exist. So
You
then they
think
say,
that you think that that traditional media still has that power, the
well, I think,
legacy media?
oh, I think among traditional Democrats, I don't think that they're the locus of power like they used to be, and that's a good thing actually. But do they matter? Of course, it all matters
Mhm.
because it's a landscape of unbelievable subliminal as well as conscious power.
And then what would you have done as a chair um, with the whole Harris affair? That's why I'm glad that you said that you have to look back and analyze, because that's why I said before we go on to say what you will do right in the future, what would you have done with the whole Harris of it all?
We totally could have had a blitz primary.
Okay.
We totally could have had a blitz primary. There were so many there were so many false narratives, such as we don't primary a sitting president. Excuse me, Don. Eugene McCarthy and Bobby Kennedy Sr. primaried Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah. Well,
That
that's
they
why I
did.
asked you, would you have primary?
Exactly,
Yeah, that's
exactly. So another one was we don't have time. Of course we had time. Of course we had time.
hmm.
And I was eager to debate. I was first of all, I was eager to debate Joe Biden, and then I was eager to debate Kamala Harris.
Do you think that there is? Do people want that? There's a willingness to do that in the party. There's a yearning for what you're saying. Do you think that will get you elected, or they're going to go, no way, we're not going to do that. We're not going to primary a sitting. We're not going to put someone in place who wants to primary a sitting Democratic president during an election year.
Well, what I've seen so far is that there is within the DNC a microcosm of the larger dynamic that we're discussing.
Hmm.
If you're talking about the membership, you're talking about really great people who are out there in the states doing the work in Nebraska and Pennsylvania and Indiana and North Carolina. And then it's a very top-down organization, right? It's a very 20th century template, I have to say. So
Hmm.
you have these decision makers who are sort of holding on to power. And it kind of makes you wonder, well, who is making that decision? Because the decisions, even such as I mentioned, which is we're not going to we're not going to really allow for any primary other than just the amplification of Joe Biden. I do not get the impression that that was a vote taken among the 448 members of the DNC.
Right.
And that's
Right.
part of what has to change. You have to, the only way you're going to save your democracy is if you practice democracy. There needs to be greater democracy within the organization, and the organization within its own processes has to be dedicated to a greater practice of democracy. You don't
What
suppress democracy to save it.
What do you think were the biggest missteps in by Kamala Harris herself? Not distancing herself from Joe Biden, maybe, or having a stronger stance on Gaza and Israel?
One of the things that has so impacted me, not just in this campaign, but in the other one as well, is how much suffering there is out there.
Hmm.
And I said throughout my campaign, this is going to be more like 2016 than like 2020.
Hmm.
When my career began in the 1980s, I was working with people with AIDS and other life challenging and truly critical moments in their lives. But there was always a sense in America at that time that when you met people whose lives were in big trouble, that the crisis was the exception and not the rule. If you really go out into America today, it's unbelievable for how many people the crisis is the rule and not the exception. It's not just that people have cancer, it's that they don't have health care. It's not just that people don't have a job, it's that they can't support a family on just one job. It's not just that their child has asthma, it's that the whole neighborhood of children has asthma because of the toxins that are spewed out of some factory in that neighborhood. I don't get the feeling that the political elite in this country have driven too many miles outside their own neighborhood in way
Mm.
too long. Now, I'm not suggesting that Donald Trump cares, but he has a way of acting like he does. He at least acknowledges the pain and the rage, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because you and I, in just a little bit, you and I spent leading up the year, leading up to the election, actually going out and talking to the American people, and you learn a lot. So hold that thought. But now that we're here, what is your pitch? Why should you be chair? Why are you the best person for the job?
You know, when the Democrats are in power, whatever party is in power in the White House has the biggest megaphone of all.
Hmm.
Right now, the megaphone of the White House is in the hands of the Republicans. The megaphone of the House and the megaphone of the Senate in the hands of the Republican. We don't have a one single megaphone, and I believe that needs to be at this point the biggest job of the DNC to articulate the moral vision of the Democratic Party. And I think that that moral vision of the Democratic Party is the traditional vision of the party, which is the traditional vision of the Declaration of Independence. I believe that government can be used as an instrument with which to help people achieve. That's what the Declaration of Independence says. That governments are instituted to secure the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Hmm.
Now, all the things that are being offered in this race by other candidates absolutely need to be done. Of course, the expertise at activism as we know it, and data analysis, and fundraising, and field organizing, all those things need to be done and will be done. And I feel very confident that no matter who the next chairman of the DNC is, that must be done. But we must go deeper. And we must have someone, because we don't have that larger megaphone, we need an inspirer in chief. We're not going to win back the House in 26. And even more importantly, we're not going to push back the entire system that MAGA represents, the aspects of that system that, in our opinion, transgresses our own deeper American values. We're not going to do it just by fighting. We're going to do it by inspiring. Donald Trump has initiated an era of political theater, and we're not going back. He's created this adrenaline rush, a collective adrenaline rush. Some Democrats spend so much time hating on him and attacking him, they don't observe him enough.
I 100%. Yeah, because he's a master at pretending that he cares. Imagine how can someone who actually has his own plane, his gold toilets, we hear it all the time, who lives in a penthouse in the sky, or an oasis by the sea, right? Get Americans, average everyday Americans, to say, "Oh, this guy can relate to the way that I live, and can relate to the suffering that my family is facing right now." That's actually quite a feat to be able to accomplish that.
Well, it doesn't help that Democrats didn't even bother to acknowledge the suffering. People will go with false hope before they'll go with no hope at all. So when he said it, this happened, back in 2016. Two candidates said the system is rigged against you. Donald Trump said it, and Bernie Sanders said it. Hillary Clinton said, let's just continue the success of the last 8 years. And millions of Americans said, what success, lady? Because I'm drowning here.
Mhm.
In the 1970s, the average American couple could afford a house. Today, the average American thinks that's a dream that's probably unattainable in their lifetime.
Mhm.
The average American in the 70s could afford a house, a car, a yearly vacation. One parent could stay home with the kids if they wanted because one salary could support a family of four, and they could send their kids to college. That was called a thriving middle class.
Yeah, and that was called the American Dream. But you're right. 2016 and 2024 were pretty much the same thing. We're doing great. The economy's great, and people have said, I'm not feeling it. So
Not only that, if I may,
yeah,
fuck you for saying that.
yeah, they were upset. Like, screw
Hmm.
you. Yeah,
Hmm. Because it's very invalidating. People felt their pain was invalidated. Their
but
pain was
Marianne,
unseen.
but if you look at the metrics of the economy, it was doing well, but the cost of goods were high, and I think that's where people felt it. You know
Well,
what I'm
Don, I
saying?
have to no, because I have to ask you, for whom was it doing well?
Probably for
Yeah.
not the
Yeah,
working class.
it was, yeah, so it was doing well for the people that, particularly the Democratic Party, was saying, well, they're our voting base.
People had 401ks and stocks. It was doing well.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
which is not anywhere near the majority of Americans or the
Okay,
majority
so
of
you and I both. Well, let's get back to this. We were out talking to folks during the election, and immediately, when the first time I went out to talk to people, I was like, "Uh oh, this is going to be tough." and the demographics that you can usually count on to vote for the Democrats just weren't there.
Because there's
So, and
wait, but
people are
let's
saying, "I am hurting. I don't feel it." Also, they believe Donald Trump gave them a stimulus check, and on and on and on. So, what were you hearing, and how is that going to help you do what you do if you are the DNC chair?
there were more than not, when I was growing up, there was a sense. It was unequivocal and it was indisputable. The Democratic Party is for the people.
Working class Americans, yeah.
And there was a sense, even if my life isn't working, more than not, there was a sense I know the Democrats are out there trying.
Hmm.
I know that the Democrats have my back. That would be like a joke today, including among young people for whom, in their institutional memory, I'm certainly old enough. You're old enough as well. There are enough of us that there were enough coattails from the New Deal that we have enough institutional memory that, okay, it's undeniable that the Democrats are out there trying. There are young people today for whom, in their memory and their lifetime, they have not had the experience of the Democrats that they know of the Democrats doing anything more for them than the Republicans. And so the emotional and psychological bonds of affection between the Democratic Party and the masses of the American people have been deeply frayed. And that is the most important job of the DNC chair going forward, I believe.
Is that, do you believe that that's real, or you think it's more to do with messaging? Because there are Democrats that they're out there fighting for people. Don't get me wrong. Don't. I mean, I think that there are Democratic politicians who really care about America and Americans. Is it a messaging problem, or do you think that there's a real um, lack in the party to actually help people?
Okay, there's a lot there. So, first of all, when you say that there are Democrats out there doing the work, there sure are. And it's very moving to me. They're in the House, they're in the Senate,
Right.
they are in state houses all over this country. They're particularly, I'm very moved by them, particularly in red states where they're out there. Even when Republicans have a supermajority, they're in there, they're doing what they can. You're absolutely right. But the average American doesn't know it.
Hmm.
Now, when you say, is it a messaging problem? This is my first question to that. When I hear Democrats among the establishment voices now saying, well, we should have been talking more about kitchen table issues.
Hmm.
My response to that is, you think? It took this defeat to make you give a darn? Because if it took this to make you even realize how much pain there is out there, to even, and the only reason you're realizing it is because you think I lost an election because I forgot to mention it, then it's not coming from your belly. It's not coming from your gut. So when you say messaging, what, tweak a few words here, tweak a few words there? Yes, it's messaging, but it's more than messaging. It's meaning it. It's the message delivered by someone who has that fire in their belly, who has been there from the beginning, who has been saying universal health care, tuition free college and tech school, the PRO Act, raise the minimum wage, who has been saying it. People are not stupid, Don. And so it's going to take a lot more. We've got two
I
years now.
think they're Democrats, so I mean, I heard Kamala Harris say raise the minimum wage, and during the campaign.
I feel compassion for her because of what she's going through, and I don't want to kick somebody when they're down, but I do not believe that she conveyed to the people who are hurting the most in this country that I see you and we are there for you. Even when you can point to some policies, it
Hmm.
was not remember how it began. It began, we're going to have an opportunity economy to people. Do you know 46% of Americans now say that they skip meals in order to pay their rent? We have 1.3 million who ration their insulin. We have over half our bankruptcies are medical bankruptcies. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. We
Cutting
have
their bills
people.
in half in order to.
Mhm.
Right.
If you were out, you were talking about being out in the country, you probably noticed if you go to a lot of the poor neighborhoods in America today, sprung everywhere now are these blood plasma centers. Do you know
Hmm.
what that means?
They're
People
making
is
selling their plasma to make money.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now, I've never sold my blood plasma, but I've been now among enough people. It's not like when you and I just go get our, get a blood, get a blood sample. It's a very uncomfortable. In the United States of America, there should not be millions of people selling their blood plasma in
Yeah.
order to pay their rent.
It sounds like you are saying, it sounds like you want to take it down to the studge. You want to do a complete
I sure do.
overhaul of the,
I sure do. I
how is
sure
that,
do.
but how is that possible? How do you do that with a party that is sort of entrenched in the way that they've been doing things all along? And not everybody's going to want this radical change that you're interested in.
Well, first of all, they haven't been doing it all along. This is an aberrational chapter. And I'll tell you something else. I saw, because I was a candidate in 2020 and in 2024, there was a difference just even in those 4 years. I felt in 2020 that for a minor candidate, I was given adequate exposure.
I was on the
You
debate
and I, right, in 2020. Notice I was on the debate stage.
in 2015 as well. It was you and I. We had a kind of a testy exchange. I don't think it was that testy,
I don't know. You were doing your job. I was doing mine. I
yeah,
never felt treated unfairly by you. But in 24, it was like put the lid on it. Anyone who is not our chosen person saying our chosen predetermined agenda. That's not democracy. Now,
yeah.
when you say, how do you
They do
change
that to
that?
reporters as well. They shut out reporters, especially reporters who are asking questions. Reporters who asked about Joe Biden's age, and such. They would shut you out
And
if you.
not going on Joe Rogan?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also true, as you and I both know, a person can't just walk into the DNC and start dictating orders and saying, this is going to be different, this is going to be different, this is going to be different.
Right. That's
That
why.
kind of that kind of top-down stuff doesn't work anymore anyway, but it's also not leadership. Leadership is you hold in 21st century, you hold a space for the brilliance of others. I can tell you this, however. In the last few days, I've spent most of my time on the phone talking to members of the DNC. I've been amazed because the stories that I have heard completely reflect the larger cultural, what I see as dysfunction that I experience as a candidate. The people out in the States get it, but too often they themselves have felt peripheralized.
Yeah,
They haven't felt central to decision making. So there's a lot I could do. There's a lot I couldn't do. But there's a lot to be said for moral persuasion. There's a lot to be said for demonstrating a new way and a new consciousness. I said to one member yesterday, um, if I were there, you would feel more permission to say what you just said to me.
yeah. Okay, let's talk about that then, because uh, I did a post recently on Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. I think she wanted to be, what is it? The Ways and Means
Oversight.
oversight,
I think it's oversight.
oversight. And it is reported that Nancy Pelosi said, it's got to be the other gentleman. I think it's Connor or
Barry
something.
Connolly.
Yeah, yeah, Connolly, because you should respect seniority. Now, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez has become a cultural icon in the last couple of years. She's very good at messaging. She has the attention of the media, right? She knows how to do all those things. Why wouldn't they elevate someone like an AOC or someone like a Jasmine Crockett or
I love Jasmine Crockett.
yeah. Do they not feel, as you say, that they have the permission to be able to do something like that?
I realized in my campaign the way officialdom was acting towards me. I realized there are people in power there who would rather see Donald Trump win again than someone like myself be the nominee.
Hmm.
Now, we're in the 21st century. It's like when you turn 30, when you turn 40, when you turn 50, when you turn 60, there are about 2 or 3 years in there before you really feel grounded in that decade of your life.
Yeah.
The same with a century. This is the 21st century, and we're now but the first few years of the 21st century, we're now in the 21st. In the first few years of the 21st century, people were still playing with the 20th century playbook. Now the 21st century is upon us. We're going to have to get there dragging and screaming, but we're going to have to get there. And I'll tell you why. Because you know who's a 21st century political phenomenon?
Hmm.
Donald Trump.
Hmm.
He is a 21st century political phenomenon, and we're not going to defeat him with a 20th century political playbook. So
What do you
those
see?
who
What are you
The,
saying? Elevate
what
young people? What are you
No,
saying?
it's not just, it has to do with consciousness. There are some young people who are talking old thought forms, and there are some older people who are with it and talking about what's happening now. What I'm saying is that the Nancy Pelosi's and others in such an establishment, there is wisdom that one has. I do believe the older you are, the more you know certain things. The younger you are, the more you know certain things. But it still should be the will of the people, which expression of one's wisdom is brought to bear. And instead, you have people like Nancy Pelosi. She's not Speaker of the House anymore. What was Nancy Pelosi doing, using her influence to make sure it was Jerry Connolly in order to protect the old guard? This idea of seniority. Do you know how much seniority matters to the woman working at Walmart who is a single mother with two kids, who can barely make her rent and is on some public assistance? Do you know how much seniority means to her? This is the problem with the Democratic Party. That is so far above and a far away and elite, distinctly separate from what is happening in the lives of the average American citizen.
It puts a party, it separates the party from the people. You-
Exactly. And that's why the new head of the DNC, my main work will be reconnect the average American to a sense that politics has any practical relevance in their lives. And you know who has been successful at doing that? Donald Trump. When I talk to Republicans, right, I'll talk to a Republican friend and I'll say something like, well, how can you possibly want this, this, or this? I'm amazed how often they come back with statistics and data and analysis. The idea that they're low information voters is inaccurate. They are high information according to the playbook of the Republican Party. Now, what that says to me is that the
High information
Republicans,
is information that the Republicans give them, that the
exactly,
conservative media,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
but low
So,
information and many of them, not all of them, in the actual facts and and what is reality in the.
some of them sometimes do have some facts and reality, and then it gets twisted and perverted into a certain way of looking at things. When I would say about some of my Democratic friends don't even have the facts and the reality, they're all just, I can't stand it. The emotionality,
All right.
right?
So what are you
So,
saying then?
but my point is that the Republicans tend to the relationship with their base.
Yeah.
The Republicans, it's like any other relationship. You got to tend to it. They don't wait till the next election and then just send fundraising emails. We need your vote. We need your money. That's how the Democrats have done. We need your votes. We need your money. And we're going to talk to you about it every 2 years. And we're going to go into these wood paneled rooms and talk about things like seniority.
Mhm.
Republicans, they're out there all the time, and I would be out there all the time. I would be on the road all the time, articulating the moral vision, what I think is the real America first, because it's American principle first,
Mhm.
American ideals first, and connecting those ideals to the experience of people and to a sense that I believe Americans want to have. And my career has proven this to me. Americans want to feel part of the American story.
Yeah.
And the Republicans have it's genius some of what they've done, and it just kills me that we haven't done it, and I can do
Let's
it.
talk about the moral vision, though, and also about messaging. I think it's kind of, it's sort of the same thing. Then what Democrats focused on a woman's right, reproductive rights during the election, democracy. Um, they wanted Republicans, never Trumpers, to vote for them and that sort of thing. Was that wrong?
First of all, you say they focused on democracy, but as I've made clear here, there was too little practicing of it in our
Right, but
own
that was
house.
their message. Like, we're vote for us if you want your democracy.
Yeah, I think having Liz Cheney out there as opposed, there was a brushing off. The Democrats have acted in the last few years. Sometimes I feel they're trying to shrink their own base. I've joked to a U.S. senator once, well, you have to audition to be a Democrat around here. I mean, one thing you have to say, I mean, I think the big tent, in a way, look at Republicans, Vivek, Elon, anybody has a good idea. You didn't serve in office before, come on in. Democrats, it's this group we want, this group we're not sure we want you. It's just um, Anybody whose heart is ablaze with the possibilities of American democracy should feel at home in the Democratic Party.
Why do Democrats throw away their own? Someone like Al Franken, and you think they're too holier
The
than thou?
perfect example, a perfect example. I said that at the time.
They're so
Um,
judgmental about, well, we don't want that. I even noticed in their interviews, like, we want this person interviews.
that's
Donald
right.
Trump cares.
Well,
Like, go
They're
anywhere.
they're very tone deaf. At the time, I remember thinking this should be the decision of the people of Minnesota and the people of Minnesota only. This is between them and Al Franken. That was number one. Number two, it was so obvious from the videos how he had been set up. Number three, Kirsten Gillibrand and others made a big deal about the fact that we have to demonstrate a
I'm in New
certain.
York. I had a tough time voting for her because of that.
But
I
it's
really was.
interesting.
I really, when I saw her name on the thing, I was like, oh God.
Although I have to say, I did meet her in 2020, and she
I'm
was
not,
very
she's a lovely person. I'm
and she
just
was
saying
very kind, but I
I
think
just
that
thought
was a
it was,
terrible mistake.
I thought
It
it
was a
was too much virtue signal.
posturing. It's
Yeah.
posturing, exactly. Not only, but and because you're right, if it had been the Republican Party, they would have been right there for him.
Look at who they are appointing now.
Although we have to also remember it was ultimately his decision.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
speaking of
that's a
that,
perfect example. That's a perfect example.
so you think just for, I hate
They
the term, go on.
Well, they thought that that would signal to the American people, we're really for women and we're really against men who, when really it signaled to the American people, boy, you people have no loyalty at all, do you?
Exactly. You have no loyalty, and it's like, it's almost, they are enamored, not really by celebrity, but by people they believe are do-gooders, that sort of thing. Like, oh, or perfection, perhaps, and when no one is perfect, right? So, to that end, do you think that the Democratic Party, and I hate this wokeness because I think it's been co-opted, but just for the sake of the conversation, do you think it's too much focus on wokeness and too much virtue signaling that hurt Democrats as well? And what do you think about that? Like using the term Latinx, when Latinos are like, I have no idea what Latinx is. They have no idea.
You know, what I feel out there is a hunger for an American conversation. You're a Jewish American, you're a gay American, you're a Black American, you're an Asian American. There's something after that hyphen as well. And sometimes it's very important to have the conversation about your own tribe, your own individual identity. That has a place in life. But the conversation about how do we feel as Americans is extremely important. And anything else, we complain about being disunited, but that very conceptualization separates us.
What do
That
you mean?
very well, because I'm this, I'm white and I'm Jewish, I'm Black, I'm gay, I'm this, I'm that. And that to me is the essence of this wokeness, this particular identity politics. And some of us have been victimized and some of us haven't been victimized, when really all of us have, if you go back into anybody's history, somebody's been victimized. We have to have a serious conversation about how it relates to now. But I think that
But
it
there are
has
certain things, Marianne.
contributed to making us the disunited states.
If I can jump in, I think
Yeah.
MAGA is the biggest identity party in modern history. But
Yeah.
yeah, right. But also,
Well, there's real racism there and nationalism there. I mean, and Christian nationalism, which is now on the table. So I'm not in any way, I'm not in any way trying to celebrate the way they do it.
got
I'm
it.
just saying that we need to
Understood.
be keepers of the story, which is an American story.
But there are things that are unique to this country. Well, being, womanizing misogyny is not unique to America, but it seems like, as far as like getting a woman to the White House, it certainly is. I mean, we're a developed nation, and we've never had a woman leader, which is just quite amazing. But also, when you look at the history of, especially African Americans to the country, we have a unique history to this country, and I think that, I mean, I don't think people should make light of that. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, well, I hope that nothing I said made you feel that I was. And obviously, when you
No,
and I
I'm thinking about how the person listening to us might.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity
Yeah,
to correct that because, as you showed, you showed the clip from the 2020 campaign and our conversation about race at the debate and our conversation about reparations.
Many of your opponents support a commission to study the issue of reparations for slavery. But you are calling for up to $500 billion in financial assistance, What makes you qualified to determine how much is owed in reparations?
Well, first of all, it's not $500 billion in financial assistance. It's $500 billion, $200 to $500 billion payment of a debt that is owed. That is what reparations is. We need some deep truth-telling when it comes. We don't need another commission to look at evidence. I appreciate what Congressman O'Rourke has said. It is time for us to simply realize that this country will not heal. All that a country is a collection of people. People heal when there's some deep truth-telling. We need to recognize that when it comes to the economic gap between blacks and whites in America, it does come from a great injustice that has never been dealt with. That great injustice has had to do with the fact that there was 250 years of slavery, followed by another 100 years of domestic terrorism. What makes me qualified to say $200 to $500 billion? I'll tell you what makes me qualified. If you did the math of the 40 acres and a mule, given that there was 4 to 5 million slaves at the end of the Civil War, there were 4 to 5, and they were all promised 40 acres and a mule for every family of 4. If you did the math today, it would be trillions of dollars. And I believe that anything less than $100 billion is an insult, and I believe that 200 to 500 billion is politically feasible today because so many Americans realize there is an injustice that continues to form a toxicity underneath the surface, an emotional turbulence that only reparations
thank you very much.
If you're talking about the American story, 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, very brave men, because if the British had won the war, they all would have been hanged. 41 of them were slave owners. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's where the American story begins, this bitter struggle that has been reiterated in every generation, even unto ours, between those who are willing to struggle and at times sacrifice. Some have sacrificed with their lives for the larger ideal that all men are created equal, all men with inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, versus those who, for their own ideological and or financial purposes, find that ideal inconvenient and have proven from the beginning of time, from the beginning of our country, that they are willing to perpetrate even the most atrocious transgressions against people in order to protect their undemocratic version and vision of things. So the American story to me is that struggle, and race has always been central to it. That's the struggle with slavery. It was a struggle during the civil rights movement. And then the struggle was personified and embodied in the institutionalized suppression of women. But the thing is, the history of America, and it is a grand history, is that ultimately we have ancestral forces that have pushed back. We had abolition that responded to slavery. We had women's suffragist movement that responded to institutionalized suppression of women. We had the early establishment of the labor movement that was our response to the Gilded Age. We had the civil rights movement that was our response to segregation in the American South. And now it's our turn. And I don't see the struggle as any less inherent in the way America works today. But today, the systemic injustice is not one specific institutional reality. It's an economic paradigm. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that corporate profits have now superseded democracy and superseded the very idea that everyone should have a fair shot in this country.
Why do you... Oh, sorry, go on. I thought
well, so that it's an economic, and I don't care what group of people we're talking about, there is an economic line that's really, as Thomas Jefferson said, it is the general tendency of the rich to prey upon the poor.
So if you want to win back, Donald Trump and the GOP have made some gains, right, with black and brown voters. So to win those voters back, they're going to have to speak to their pocketbooks. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying to win anybody back.
Win anybody back. So let's talk about how Democrats approach the next 4 years here, because this is a very simple question, starting with what they do first. Do they attend the inauguration? Does Joe Biden and Kamala Harris attend Donald Trump's inauguration?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Listen, whether we like it or not, he was democratically elected. This is, once again, you're not going to win by just fighting Donald Trump. We're going to win by inspiring the American people. We want to own and embrace the institutional pillars of this country. We couldn't stand the fact that he wouldn't attend that other inauguration. So what, we're going to be like him? No,
Well, the
very
thing is
important.
that you have called him a fascist. So by
No,
them,
I have said that there are fascist tendencies in his behavior at times and in that movement.
so wouldn't attending his inauguration be sort of, you don't think that would be normalizing him and his politics? Do you think that that
No,
might
no,
cause
I
more
do not. No, I do not. That's an example of something. What you think that that's going to? No, see, that's interesting because it would be, the view of some Democrats that that would be the truth. To me, it would be saying to the American people, we're a bunch of hypocrites. We say that we don't like it when he doesn't honor the great traditions of the United States, but we can do it. It's
Hmm.
like, to me, what's your message there? Talk about posturing. No, if we want to be the protectors of the great pillars of American democracy, it says in the Constitution that on noon. Actually, it originally said on March 4th. Now it says on January 20th at noon, a new president shall be inaugurated. Damn right, we should all be there.
What do you think Democrats should do again over the next 4 years? Because just a few weeks ago, remember how Hakeem Jeffries and the House Democrats saved the House Speaker Mike Johnson, right, with this CR, the continuing resolution to keep the government funded. Republicans, I don't believe that they would. They didn't have enough votes to do it on their own. I don't know if they would have done the same thing if the shoe was on the other foot for the Democrats. But should Democrats help Republicans, or should they just let the government? Should they have helped, or should they have let the government shut down? Should they help Republicans and Donald Trump with his agenda moving forward and from 2025 on?
Congress is a co-equal branch of government, and the Republican majority in the House is razor thin. Now, with your principles, you must never compromise. Politics itself is the art of compromise. So when the president does something that we agree with, then of course we should support him being successful at whatever we might agree with. When he doesn't, we should stand on our own principles and do everything possible to negotiate as much of what we want as we can possibly get. And anyway, and the case on that one had less to do with the specifics in the bill and more to do with President Musk and how Musk said, kill the bill. And then a few hours later, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance says, yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, but there are many Americans who are saying, I think that the Democrats should just sit back and let Republicans, stew in their own juices.
What do you mean stew in their own juices? They have the
Not
power.
not helping them, not because Republicans have been obstructionists, and they have hardly supported. Well, many times they have not supported things that the Democrats have wanted, and that even the president of the United States has wanted. And so some Democrats are saying, "Hey, look, just let them do their thing, and you don't have to help them." Because they're not going to be able to get a lot through if they don't have Democratic support.
I remember when Mitch McConnell said, our goal is for Barack Obama to be a one-term president.
Yep.
What, we're going to go get down in the disgusting mud like that with them? Our eyes should always be on what would serve the American people. Now, believe me, I think the Democrats have folded way too much, but this has been going on for decades that we fold way too much. But at the same time, our eye must always be on the ball of doing what would be best for the American people at any given time. And
If
shutting the
you're
government would not have been good for thousands and thousands of people.
if you are chosen as a DNC chair, part of your responsibility is going to be trying to help recruit Democrats to run for office, right? And the right kind of people. So considering that you described, considering that what I just asked you, how would you describe the best candidate to run against a MAGA opponent or to run against a Donald Trump? What does that kind of political candidate look like?
Okay, so let's get real. So when the Democratic Party, and I'm sure that this is true of the Republican Party as well, okay? When they go out there to recruit, quote unquote, the best candidate, this is what it really looks like. This is the first question. You ready?
Hmm.
Can you self-fund?
Yeah.
Can you self-fund means you got $1 million lying around? You got $1
Mhm.
million lying around that you can risk playing this. So let's talk for real about what it means to recruit the quote unquote best candidate. To me, to recruit the quote unquote best candidate is to recruit someone whose experience and values and political beliefs are the most aligned with the best of the Democratic Party. Many of those people do not have $1 million lying around. And I would see my role as head of the DNC to allocate resources in such a way that people who do not represent only the wealthy classes in the United States would have a chance to be in the game.
So it's not a certain kind of candidate. It is what?
It is somebody who understands how much suffering there is out in the United States, how the instruments of government must be used to help people, how people are hungry in this country, how people lack health care in this country, how people need higher wages in this country. When you have the elderly in this country, half of the elderly in this country live on less than $25,000 a year, people who are passionate about protecting the environment. Yes,
For
I want people who want to be Democrats, who are the corporatist Democrat to me has become I won't say a plague on the Democratic Party, but I will say that there has been an undue influence of money and on the party. That's obvious, but also those who represent the views. You either we have this matrix, right? This matrix of corporate power. Whether it's insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big chemical companies, big ag, gun manufacturers, big oil and defense contractors. So as soon as the Democratic Party started taking all that corporate money back in the 70s, our moral authority has been whittled away. I
Mhm.
want candidates who want to bring the Democratic Party back to the Democratic Party. They don't necessarily have that money. And to me, that's where the allocation of money on behalf of the DNC should be used more to actually support the candidates who, as I see it, are the actual Democrats.
It seems like the Republicans now, especially with the MAGA influence, that loyalty is right at the top of the list of a good candidate as a Republican.
Loyalty to him specifically.
Yes, loyalty to him and to MAGA. Okay, so if you are chosen as the next DNC chair, who would you back right now to run for president in 2028? Would it be, I don't know, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
I
yourself?
have no idea. I have no idea. I just want, if I'm chair of the DNC, I just want for the Democratic Party to be set up in such a way that any great candidate in 2028 will have not just the infrastructure, but the field of consciousness out in the country ready to go, like ready to go, whoever you are. And it might be one of those names. It might be a Newsom. It might be a Pritzker. I like Pritzker. It might be a Pritzker or a Newsom or a Whitmer, but it might be someone we wouldn't even think about right now. But I want anybody to be in. This idea of the big names, that's part of the problem with the Democratic Party. Are you already an insider? We're going to open this thing up. I think the Democratic Party has become this closed system, and that's part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this is such a great conversation. I could talk to you all day. I wish that when I was in legacy media that I had the opportunity to have longer conversations like this with people instead of 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever at the most and commercial break, because you get so much more out of it.
You texted me
I,
once about reparations. I was so excited. I thought I might come on, but I love talking to you. Call me. We'll text it in the middle of the night.
we can talk about. I listen. I wrote a book and I said that reparations. That we've got the metrics, we've got the technology, I should say, to figure it out. All we have to do is plug it into AI, as one would do with a lawsuit, and use some
Good
very
point.
similar metrics to that. Do you agree with that?
Well, what I agree is that once we decide that it is the right thing to do, and it's like I said in that clip you showed, it's a debt that is owed in my mind. And for me, for a country as well as for an individual, you're not going to have the future you want if you don't clean up the past. To me,
Mhm.
this is a gaping moral wound on the psyche of the American people. Uh, a black person's great grandchildren and a white person's great grandchildren will be greatly served if we will just handle this. Once we have a critical mass of Americans who get that, then there are all kinds of ways, including help from AI,
Yeah.
including the kind of plan that I had. How we do it is not the issue. That we decide to do it because it's the right thing to do is what's important. And this is where leadership comes in.
Do you think it's the right thing to do?
Absolutely.
You do. I love you
Listen,
for that.
Germany paid $89 billion to Jewish organizations at the end of World War II. And what I have noticed, this is not just about financial remuneration. This is about psychological and emotional repair.
Right.
And
Right.
that war was over in 1945. We're still carrying the toxicity from 1865. And that's part of what we talked about on the debate stage that night.
Then what is with the banning of books and not wanting to teach Black history in this country? What is that? Because it is American history.
It is very much American history. And in fact, is it interesting that you, going back to Germany after World War II, part of the agreement, this is interesting to me, part of the agreement that was made between Germany and the Jewish organizations at the end of World War II was not only the financial remuneration, but a guarantee that German children would be taught the history of the Holocaust in perpetuity.
Mm,
And
mm.
that should be part of our agreement too. It
Oh,
is
you think that'll happen
outrageous.
in America, Marianne? Come on.
Well, hold on a moment, if I may say so. I believe that what Donald Trump, and I won't say Donald Trump specifically, but what a lot of the white supremacist forces have been able to do, this goes back to what you and I were first saying. We left a void. We left a void. Democrats over the last few decades have been very precious talking about race. They'll come out really loud about it when there's a horror, like a George Floyd incident. If there's one particular incident, there'll be a lot of we really care. But there needs to be a much larger conversation that has never been tended to about race. Even, in fact, even better to be had at a time when there's not a particular incident. It's a historical pattern that we're dealing with. That's what you and I were talking about on the debate stage in 2020. It's the fact that we have never totally dealt with the economic gap that was created when you have between 4 and 5 million formerly enslaved people who are suddenly free. But where are they supposed to go? Well, they're promised the 40 acres and a mule. They never receive it. And nobody can look at this rationally and fail to recognize the ways in which that injustice is continued to this day. Now, I'd like to say something, if I might, here.
Yes.
There are people who would say, well, what about Oprah Winfrey? Huh? What about
These
Magic
these are
Johnson?
exceptions. These are
Huh?
exceptions.
What about Tyler Perry? Huh? What about Don Lemon? Huh? It has been in my lifetime a step forward that I do believe that we have created in America, and many have struggled, sacrificed, and even died, so this could be true. I'm not minimizing this. I do believe that we have created in America, and this is different from when I was a little girl, where no matter what your race, if you were smart enough, if you were talented enough, if you were brilliant enough, you have a very good shot of making it in America. My point is that you shouldn't have to be brilliant to make it in America. You shouldn't have to be talented. You shouldn't have to be a great athlete, a great intellect, a great artist in order to make it in America. There are people who are none of those things, but they're good people and they work hard and they should be able to make a living on just one job and they should be able to own a home if they work hard enough and they should be able to raise a family. And yes, I do believe that there are certain portions of our population for whom that is more difficult. And that is obviously undeniable. And that definitely includes race.
Do you blame, if I want to go back to an earlier question, do you blame any one person for the loss or any one, is it a combination? Do you blame Joe Biden for the loss? Do you blame Kamala Harris for the loss? Do you blame the Democratic Party?
The word blame doesn't work for me. Holding accountable works for me. And I hold account the fact that the DNC at the very beginning said that there would be no primary, basically. Simone Sanders said it on MSNBC. The fact that MSNBC and CNN, for instance, would not have me on. I was completely blacklisted. During the 2020, for a minor candidate, I was given, I believe, adequate exposure. This time, and what they do, and listen, Don, you've been around. I don't need to tell you what they do. They create narratives to get people out of the conversation.
And metrics that sometimes are unattainable for certain people.
She's kooky. That's a big one. They've been saying women who don't toe the line are crazy. That's a misogynistic trope that goes back probably millennia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Donald Trump uses that on women and also on minorities. That dumb as a rock or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so speaking of the history of the country that you talked about, someone who's going to have a big legacy, and obviously in the history of the country, and to help to lead the country. And I'm talking about the former president, Jimmy Carter. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. He just died. Your thoughts? What did he mean to Marianne Williamson?
He was just a good man. His moral values, his humanitarianism, and his intellect. I also think he was a better president than some people give him credit for. Those
I
people, people say he was a great man, but he was a terrible president. I don't even think he was a terrible president. Remember, those hostages did come home alive.
hmm
And if he had done some Rambo cowboy thing, they would have all been killed.
Right.
So I think we should honor and give great praise, a life well lived, a shining example of kind of the best. He was a real American, He was a peanut farmer from Georgia. He was the best of us. And I also feel he loved Rosalind so much. He was 100 years old. I'm happy for them. I'm happy for them, and I'm happy for him. You
Yeah.
know, probably at some point along the line, he said, "I'd rather die than see Donald Trump become president
Okay.
again."
You're the first person to say that out loud. I've received that text message a lot, but you're the first person to say that out loud. Look, and I agree with you, especially on the look what a humanitarian he was. Look what he did with Habitat for Humanity. Look what he did the peace deal that he brokered between Sadat and
Yes,
Menachem Begin. Remember?
yes, very much so. And that's an issue where, looking back historically, seeing the mistakes that were made, it's so important. The US government takes this very corporate attitude: don't complain, don't explain, don't apologize. It's so important in the history of the Middle East, and Menachem Begin, and also Clinton tried.
Right.
And after that, you look at what happened, Bush, and after that, they were the last two American presidents who tried to stand on principle, and stand for justice in the Middle East. And if we had had that continue, I don't think we would be in the horrible positions that we're in today.
Are you going to run again?
Right now, I'm running for DNC chair, and I don't know what path lies before me.
Does it concern you about the level of influence that people who are not elected to office have now? People are calling it, we're in an oligarchy right now.
Of course. Of course I am. As Louis Brandeis said, the late Supreme Court Justice, you can either have large amounts of money concentrated in the hands of a few, or you can have democracy. You cannot have both. That, we were talking earlier about Musk weighing in on the budget reconciliation. And then and kill it. And then you have, a few hours later, the duly elected president-elect weighing in on this. Absolutely, I'm concerned about the influence of Musk and the influence of the entire oligarchic scene. But it is perpetuated, and it is fostered, and it is maintained by just the kinds of things I said to you before. You have can you self-fund? The money in politics is the cancer underneath all the other cancers. When huge corporate interests, and with their lobbying and with their lobbyists and huge moneyed influencers, can just walk into the halls of Congress and say, you can pass this bill, kill that one. My God, it's like a secular Ayatollah or something. No, absolutely, it upsets me.
Do you think there will be a woman president in our lifetime?
I know that the American people are ready. But what I've seen from my experience is the gap between the consciousness of the American people and the way the political system operates. And that's the gap we need to close.
Hmm. Marianne Williamson, thank you.
Oh, great talking to you.
This is a fantastic conversation. I hope that you come back.
Thank you.
We are thrilled to have you as one of our watchers. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button as well. And that way you can be notified about all of our new content. There's plenty of it for you. We're live every day at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We drop more videos at 2 p.m. Eastern and at 5 p.m. And if you want even more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon Nation, of the Lemon community. Members receive access to special community posts, exclusive content, and live shows. So just head right over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.